Oh, yes.
Welcome back once again, everyone. Today we're taking a look at the new Walmart exclusive retro Headmaster, Hardhead. Hardhead is a re-release of the Titans Return figure, utilizing the head that came with the Transformers Legends version of that mold. And as you can see, this time he's being released in a recreation of his 1987 packaging, with a big exception being that his artwork has been redrawn to reflect the head sculpt of the Headmaster that's actually included here, which is based off the Japanese Generation 1 cartoon. So if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at Hardhead's packaging, with a specific look at his tech specs on the back. Then we'll open it up, we'll see the instructions, and then we'll see Hardhead himself in both his vehicle and robot modes. I'll be doing some group shots and comparisons with Hardhead today, and then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So Hardhead comes in this really nice 1987 style packaging. Again, you get the modified artwork on the front. Now this artwork is a bit misleading, much like Brainstorm's, because it depicts Hardhead wielding two of these green rifles. Well, unfortunately, this version of the character only actually includes one of them, which I don't even know if we can see in the box. But yeah, he only comes with one. And this kind of got my hopes up. I'm thinking like, oh, come on, guys. Did they give us two? Please give us two. No, they didn't. We only get the one still, so that is very disappointing. What's not disappointing, though, is that his Headmaster, Duros, got his old name back. In Titans Return, they called him Furos, because I guess they couldn't use Duros. Well, they've since rectified that, so you are getting a much more authentic experience to the original Generation 1 toy. Now, if we look at the top, you get your 4-step transformation redone with the modern figure. You get some shots of the figure here on the side, on this side as well. And then on the back, you get your really cool, slightly modified 1987 battle scene. They've followed suit here by giving our Headmasters the new head sculpts on this packaging. And then down here, we get the tech specs. And for Hardhead, his function is ground assault. Quote, it's either my way or no way. And then his description is, the only way to get him to follow advice is to persuade him to come up with the idea himself. Stubborn, doesn't talk much. Very fitting description for somebody named Hardhead. He's hard-headed. So very cool. Let's open this guy up. All right, here's our look at the instructions for Hardhead. See this render of him here on the front with him actually wielding his shoulder cannon as a handheld cannon, which is interesting. Open this up. You get your little part layout. Get the main vehicle, big cannon, the rifle, and the Headmaster, Duros. Here you can see the little how-to for actually placing Duros inside of the cockpit area on the vehicle. And then on the bottom, it shows you how to actually open up the top of the cannon and place Duros on that cannon. So you can kind of ride it all Mad Max style. And then you can also place the rifle on top of the cannon for added firepower. Bring it around to the back, and you get the actual transformation from vehicle to robot. How to place the Headmaster, and then how to make him hold a gun if you need help with such things. And here we have Hardhead in his vehicle mode. So you can see I have the rifle attached to the top, which is really the only place you can actually store it without just taking it off and leaving it around. The cannon can move up and down. It's on kind of a complicated little apparatus here. Multiple hinges and a slider and all that. So you get some movement out of it, which is very cool. It does roll fairly well, not as well as, say, Chrome Dome or Brainstorm. A little bit of resistance to it. Ooh, that popped off. All right. But overall, it makes for a decent little futuristic tank-type vehicle. You can see the cockpit section over here with Duros piloting from the inside. So very cool looking. And here we bring in the Titans Return version of Hardhead, which you can see uses similar colors, though there are some key differences. On our newer toy, virtually everything is a darker shade compared to what we got on the Titans Return figure. There's also some pretty significant paint application differences. On the very front here, you can see this gray section, which just kind of cuts off here. On this side, it actually goes all the way around, and then you actually get some black down there in that little kind of circular area that's formed from this loop. The rest of this tends to be more paint apps in favor of the new toy. So on the sides of the treads, you can see a lot of silver and red paint, which is meant to emulate details on the original toy. And the top of the cockpit is painted green to look like an actual roof, so you can't just see straight down into it. Other than that, very similar color layouts in the vehicle modes. I guess one key difference is that you get some brown at the top of the cannon here, but black here. And that's really about it. Very similar looking. I would say overall the paint apps on the new toy are superior. I just think the added detail along the treads really outweighs the little extra bit here. Plus the whole painted roof is also just really, really nice. And for a full comparison, here are the two hardheads with their mold mate, the Decepticon Quake. Now what's interesting is that Hardhead is the only Autobot Headmaster to get a Decepticon redeco. Any of the others that do get redecos always get recolored into Autobots, so just fun little fact. And you can see there are no molding differences in the vehicle mode. In fact, the only molding difference between these guys and Quake is the faceplate for the robot mode. But I will say I do like the difference in color layout between all of them. He does have his own paint mask, which has some things in common, but a lot of differences compared to the other guys. So, you know, it is a really nice way to reuse that mold and get something quite different out of it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the battle mode. That involves putting Duros on the cannon here. So the first thing we want to do is get Duros out of the cockpit. So just lift it up, pull him out. There's like that little slot that his heel spur goes into. Close that. Now the gun you don't really have to take off. Just go ahead and rotate it out of the way. And lift this piece up and well, you're not going to do that. Don't pop it off the hinge. That came off easily, huh? Okay, so get it up, and you're gonna like fold it back until it sits nice and flush against the back of the cannon there. And you're gonna keep Duros in the same position he was already in. Slide his feet all the way forward, push him down, and there's a little groove for his heel spur to go into, but it's not a tight one, so nothing really locks him in place like it should, which is kind of a shame, but you can get him in there. Get him piloting the double cannon of doom. Honestly, in my opinion, one of the weaker little battle modes for the alt modes. It's just not very different. I mean, he's just sitting on the cannon at this point, but it's something. It really works well if you have extra Titan Masters, because you could have Duros, you know, piloting with somebody else manning the cannon, and it's fine. It's okay for what it is. Here's another group shot with the mold mates. You get the old hardhead here with his Titan Master Furos, who is most likely just Duros with a different name. And then you get Quake with his Titan Master Chasm. So they're all just manning their cannons, and that's really about it. Again, not the most exciting mode. But now, let's take a close look at our actual Titan Masters. Okay, now here's our close-up look at the Headmaster Duros. You can see he's got some really nice colors going on here. That green just really pops up close. And his head is very painted. You can see the helmet portion is painted gray, like the main helmet. His face is painted yellow, and then he gets his eyes painted in blue. So he's done up very, very well. And then when you compare him to his previous version, Furos, see that the plastic layout's about the same, just different shades, and their head paint's very similar, except Furos here lacks the gray paint on the top of the head. So already this guy's kind of winning. And then for fun, let's look at this poor unpainted soul. This is Chasm from Quake, and you can see just what a difference a paint job makes. I mean, this goes from looking like a cheap afterthought to just a standalone figure and just something really nice. I don't know, there was this weird pattern where, like, whenever a Titan Master was used for, like, a repaint of, you know, the main character is meant for, they almost always just decided not to paint it at all. So a lot of those like later wave characters really suffered this. And with that, it's time to start our transformation. So if you haven't already, remove the Headmaster as well as the green rifle. Just set them aside. Flip this guy upside down, and this little plate right here swings up. Comes his crotch piece. And you want to separate his legs, so you're going to pull them off of this little tab here, and extend them all the way down till they're straight. Same thing here. Flip his feet out, which will lock into place a little bit. You got a little click there. That's what you want. Then we're going to pull his arms out and unplug them from his chest plate there. And swing all this down. This will plug in right there to the abdomen area. Let's go ahead and slide his cannon off to the side. It's on that little guide rail. This will come into play here in a moment. Slide it to the side, and then you just kind of fold everything up. So you fold this panel down, and you fold this panel down, and this little nub here plugs into his butt. Like so. Now the arms extend out on two hinges. You pull them till they're straightened out like that. Then his fists can easily just be pried out with a fingernail. And they kind of have a soft lock. You can't hear the click, but you can feel it. So here's the body. Pretty cool so far, right? Now let's go ahead and take Duros. Fold them up like you do any other Headmaster. To reveal this mug. Plug it into the neck socket. And let's give him his rifle. Alright, so this is Hardhead's default robot mode. And in this configuration, you can see that the shoulder-mounted cannon is kind of idle. Just fold it up on his back. And then to bring it forward, use that little double hinge to go all the way up here and swing this forward. And that's why this guide rail is important, because if this thing's centered, there's no clearance for the head. So you gotta make sure it's slid over. And it still kind of contacts the shoulder area a bit, depending on positioning. But overall, you can get it where you need it. And this is his more classic look. This is how you typically see the guy. Though if you want to get a little out there, you can do like you saw in the instructions and remove this from the little apparatus entirely. And just have him wield it like a big old gigantic hand cannon. Now, personally, I think this looks really silly, and you won't see me utilizing this, but you can do it. You know, I don't know. To me, it feels like when you have the Seekers, like, wield their null rays in their hands, it just looks off. Like, you know where it's supposed to go. Anywhere else just looks wrong. So I am going to opt to keep it right here, where it belongs. Yeah, I really dig this. This guy looks absolutely fantastic. Now, when it comes to posability, obviously you have all the articulation involved with, you know, moving the cannon around. The head's on a ball joint, as you would expect. The shoulders are also ball jointed, so they can go kind of back and forth and go in and out a little bit. And you can also use this extra hinge piece right here to raise them up more. Though on this side, you're going to hit that cannon. He does have a bicep swivel. He has a single elbow bend. I mean, you can bend this top part too, but it looks very unnatural. It's very painful, in fact. He does have wrist swivel, which is really nice. The one thing he doesn't have is waist swivel because of his transformation. So his main body is a bit of a brick. The hips are ball jointed as well. He has a thigh swivel. It's right up here. It's a single knee bend and non-articulated feet. So pretty close to what you'd expect from the others. The big difference is that he doesn't have that waist articulation. So even without that, it's a huge improvement over the original toy from G1 because that thing was infamous for being just an absolute brick. Like, you basically just stood the tank up on its front end and, you know, unfolded some things, and there you had it. Now we get our Titans Return figure, so we can do some more comparing. And in this mode, you see much more of a difference in the color breakup than you did in the tank mode. This upper arm area is no longer the same color as his shoulders and forearms, opting for that brownish tan color. He also uses that brown for the tops of his hips rather than black, so the legs look a little more uniform on the top half. And that brown persists even to his little wrist areas here. So they kind of swap. He gets more color variation on the arms and less on the legs. Now, I don't know if one's really better than the other. I don't think that matters too much. What is definitely an improvement, though, is the fact that he gets these really nice tampos on his thighs that the old toy just lacks. It helps not only put him closer to the Generation 1 toy in appearance, it just makes him more detailed overall. He also opts to have just a plain black Autobot symbol on his stomach rather than a little red one. And that's something I noticed with these new recolors is that usually somewhere on their body, they have a very plain looking Autobot symbol. Whether it's black or just, a white outline on a surface's color. And I'm wondering if that's not meant to, reference the fact that these guys had the heat rub signs basically where you see these symbols. To me, that would make a lot of sense. Anyway, looking at more details, the pelvic areas are similar. They both have kind of the silver buckle, red in the middle. He has black underneath that red, whereas he has just more red. And they both have yellow on the sides, though his only paints these triangles. I wouldn't say one's really better than the other, they're just different. We already talked about the added paint apps on the treads. I think that just looks way better, helps break up the colors more, looks more premium. So then the other really big difference between these two is obviously the head sculpt. And you can see whereas the original Titans Return figure has a face mask type helmet, which is accurate to the G1 toy, this guy again uses the Japanese anime head sculpt, which is actually very similar in appearance when it comes to the helmet part. The helmets are different. The exact proportions and exact detailing is different between the two, but they're both very close and both can easily be taken as a translation of the 80s toy design. So I wouldn't say one helmet design is really better than the other. They're both very close to each other. So then it really comes down to, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the old Optimus Prime-esque faceplate, or do you prefer a mouth and a nose that you can actually see? Now, generally, I err on the side of whichever looks closest to the G1 toy. However, it's worth pointing out that unlike, say, Brainstorm, Hardhead almost never has a faceplate in any of his fictional appearances. He didn't in the American cartoon, the Japanese cartoon, not in the IDW comics or the old Marvel comics. In fact, the only major media I can think of in which Hardhead actually used a faceplate was Regeneration 1, which is actually weird because Regeneration 1 is a sequel to the Marvel comics in which he didn't have the faceplate. So I guess he decided to switch it up at some point, or they just forgot how he was drawn. So that kind of makes me want to do a 180 here compared to how I normally lean, in that I actually really prefer this. It's just how you typically see him portrayed. And it does make for a much more expressive character. So I think it's safe to say, in my opinion, the new Hardhead is just better in every way. I like his colors more. They're a lot closer to the original toy colors. He has a lot more painted and tampo detail. And again, I kind of dig the head sculpt more. And I'm surprised by that because I am a bit of a toy purist, though I am willing to make exceptions, and in this case, I feel an exception is necessary because I think it looks better. And it looks more like the character that I've experienced in all the different forms of media. And now for one last group shot, we're going to bring Quake back into the mix. And I gotta say, despite the fact that he is a retool and doesn't really match his classic appearance too well, he's very nice looking in his own right. The lack of paint in his Titan Master's body is more than made up for with the paint and tampo details that he gets in his robot mode. I mean, his face is very beautifully painted. He's got the cool, lightning bolt Decepticon symbols. Got all this blue and silver paint slathered on here, some black paint. So, yeah, again, despite the fact that he's not very G1 accurate, I actually very much like the Quake toy. He rocks this body type very well. So moving away from that aside, I think it's about time we wrap this review up. So my final thoughts on the new Hardhead, I very, very much think this is the definitive Hardhead toy. He's not compromised by being a retool of anyone else. He is a completely original mold. So they were free to make him like as accurate as possible without having to really compromise much of the details as far as, transformation and all that. The colors on this version, I think, are just a step above what you see in the Titans Return toy. I mean, again, they're the same basic colors, but the shades used, I think, are just... they're less kiddie looking, and they are a closer match to the 80s toy. And again, I really dig the head sculpt. It's so sharp looking compared to the older one. It might just be the flatter paint they're using that just really helps the details pop, but I really like it. And luckily, despite a few uses, there are no real tolerance issues when it comes to the joints or anything. Though I will say I noticed that the cannon comes out of its little hole a little more easily. Not to the point where it flops around, but I noticed it lifts out of that little 5mm port a bit more easily than the old one. But again, that's not enough to really bother me. So yeah, I think this is the Hardhead that everyone should pick up. Even if you bought the Titans Return one, I think the improvement in the paint, the plastic colors, the face sculpt, just make it worthy of a second run. So yeah, honestly, I do recommend this guy a bit more strongly than I have the others so far. He just really appeals to me. I think the changes that they made to this toy to bring him into this new retro line really just helped highlight the strengths of this mold. So if you do happen to come across one of these guys in Walmart, I would say pick it up without any hesitation. He just looks good in all modes. As usual, that is just my take on this action figure. So now I want to know what you all think. Do you guys agree that this is the definitive Hardhead toy? Or is there another version you prefer, whether that's the Titans Return version, the Legends version, heck, the G1, or was it Universe version, I think? It was like the Onslaught Redeco. Not sure if anyone will pick that one, but it'd be interesting to see. Any and all of your feedback is always welcome in the comments section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. I thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new Transformers Retro Headmaster Hardhead. And with all that said, I will see you next time.